The things, proper things I ain't playing anymore. I ain't playing. Fine. I don't know why you've called me smiling.
So when I was like, I smiled, see a beautiful face.
In Jesus' name. In Jesus' name. Wow. Is this what I want to do to my hair? I think it is. Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. My name is Hena Bryant, aka Bookish Babe, and I'm basically here to help you improve your reading experience as well as navigate the literary sphere. So a bit about myself. So obviously, not obvious, well, it's not obvious, but obviously I'm 23. I work in publishing. I also own my own imprint. And I've met a lot of people who never know where to start when it comes to reading. And I'm just someone, like, because I work in publishing and I'm also like a serial reader, as someone has referred to me. I'm also a serial reader. Like, I always know what's going on in the world of books and publishing. And so for me, I definitely feel like reading is really, 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 really important. And I understand that a lot of people may have not had access to books when they were younger, but I would definitely recommend getting into reading now, because honestly, like, books will outlive all of us. Books will document absolutely everything that happens in the world, whether that is non-fiction or fiction. I understand that not a lot of people, well, not even not a lot of people, I understand that not everyone digests information in the same way. But if I can help people basically choose the sort of books that they should read, or even understand the differences between certain books and genres, and so obviously, like, my first video, as an introductory video, I'm going to basically share with everyone my top 10 books of all time. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this list was incredibly hard to put together. Like, I'm not even happy, bruv. Like, I was there when I sat down and I was like, okay, your top 10 books of all time. Like, you have to make sure that they're not just any here, there book. You know what I mean? Like, even though I've only read a couple here, there books, you just have, like, I wanted to make sure that there were good books and there were books that I would want my children to read, all of which I believe I would want my children to read for different reasons. And all of which I would actually recommend everyone to read. Like, a lot of the books that are on this list are the books that I recommend people to read as soon as I meet them, and mainly because they are my favorite books. But I also want to just say that everyone has different literary tastes, and that is just a fact, bro. Like, me, I don't like non-fiction. Obviously, I try it here and there. I dabble, dib and dab. I'm not big on non-fiction books. I think that's mainly because all the non-fiction books that I've read in the past have been like self-help. They've been like finance-based, like all these sort of motivational books that I personally find really, really condescending. Anyways, I'm going on. As I was saying, there are unfortunately no non-fiction titles on my top 10 books of all time. And I also want to say that this list could change. Like, I'm only 23. I can only imagine the amount of books that I have left to read in my lifetime. God spare life. Maybe only like one or two books might survive the test of time, but these are my top 10 books of all time for now. All right, so the first one, and this, guys, everyone, if you've met me in real life and we've had a conversation about books, this is the first book I actually talk about, because this is my favorite book ever. This is my favorite book ever. And I really fell in love with this book because I felt like it was really raw. I absolutely loved the author. Like, obviously there was like a huge conversation sparked between himself and James Baldwin. And so the first book that is on my top 10 books of all time, now this is in no particular order, even though this is my favorite book, this doesn't mean that, it's just my favorite book. Anyways, so the first book is Native Son by Richard Wright. Now, guys, as I said, this is the book that I kind of push everyone to read. However, I will say that I've had people read this book and they've come back to me and said that they didn't enjoy it. And that's fair. It's like, at the end of the day, I can't come and kill you if you did not enjoy the book. I personally like this book. It explores blackness. It explores black male anxiety. It's very raw. And like a brief synopsis is that it's basically about a 20-year-old boy called Bigger Thomas, who, despite trying to better himself, ends up playing into every single black stereotype or black male stereotype that existed during the 1930s in Chicago. And obviously it is a sad story. I'm not gonna lie, like it's really sad, and it is quite frustrating to read because you're just like, but why? But why? Like why does that have to happen to him? Why do people have to look at him that way? Like, it's such a sad story, and I personally enjoyed this book, and this is definitely the first book I'd want my daughters to read. Yes, my daughters, when they're of age to sort of digest this sort of information and content, of course. But yeah, like, I really love this book. As I said, that it sparked a conversation. And, you know, whilst Wright thought that it was a protest novel, authors or writers such as James Baldwin completely like denounced the fact that it was a protest novel and just didn't think that having a protagonist that basically fed into every single stereotype was a form of protest. So the second book on my list, and obviously this is one that I've read recently. I read this towards the end of last year. And I have to say, guys, this book is a masterpiece. Literally, it is just a masterpiece. It's beautifully written. It's well crafted. It's a beautiful book in itself. It's pretty. And obviously, like, I've got some of the books on my bookshelves, but I just can't be bothered to like pull and say here it is and there it is. So I'm just going to like put a picture up of each book and like the title and everything. So this book is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. I'm hoping that I pronounced both her first name and last name correctly. But yeah, Bernardine Evaristo. As I said, this book is a masterpiece. It basically explores the lives of 12 characters over several decades. And so yeah, 12 characters in the UK over several decades, and it basically explores themes like sexual identity, social history, and more. And one thing I have to say is big up Auntie Bernardine. Like, you snapped when you wrote this book because it is a masterpiece. Honestly, it's a fantastic book. Auntie B represented every woman, whether it was through like in race, like class, like sexual orientation and identity. Like, she represented women so well, and it's hard for me to actually speak about this book without telling you exactly what happens. And I don't want to do that. Like, I do want you guys to go and obviously read these books and find out for yourself. But just know that it's a collection of stories, and it follows the lives of 12 characters over several decades in the UK, and basically just their different life experiences. I really like this one because, like, obviously Bernardine, she wrote so well about Black women, and she wrote so well about people of like a Caribbean or African. Wow. Jamaican much? Caribbean and African heritage, and their experiences as women in the UK and their sexual identity. And I just personally love this book. I can go on about it forever, but I want to leave some room to discuss this at a later point. So the third book on my list is The Lonely Londoners by Sam Southern. Now, I absolutely love this book. It's a really short read. Despite it being serious, like, Sam's writing is very satirical. Not obviously, but it basically covers the immigrant experience of Caribbeans during post-war Britain, and that's why it was such a serious topic, because obviously, like, so much happens, and for the longest of times, like, we all know how the UK is. And we all know what people think of migrants. So there was just, what I really like about this book is that there was this sense of realization by a lot of the characters where obviously the UK was romanticized as this place of opportunity, of this place where anything can happen, and like the beautiful motherland. And then obviously everyone coming from the Caribbean, there were a few, I believe there was one character who had come from Africa, and it was about how all their experiences sort of like, in, not what to say interlinked, but how they all their experience how all their experiences married together, and how all of them had how all of them come to the realization that the UK ain't all what it seems. However, it's a fantastic book. It's really, really short. I completely love Sam Salvin. I think he's a fantastic writer. As I said, it's very serious yet humorous, and I would say the tone in his writing, it makes it very, it makes it very digestible. It isn't something that's going to give you anxiety or make you feel like, oh my god, this is terrible. The fourth book on my list. Now this one, I feel like I'm really excited by a lot of the books on my list. A lot of the books. Okay, my throat feels better. But there was a time in my life when this book in particular rules a lot for me, and I will never forget this book. I don't think I ever will. It's definitely a book that I think everyone should read. Everyone should read. Everyone should read. So, anyways, the fourth book on my list is The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill, and Lawrence Hill is a Canadian author. And obviously I was saying that I love this book, and yeah, like everything about this book is fantastic. A brief synopsis. It's basically about a young girl. I will not disclaim any names, but it's about a young girl who was abducted by colonizers. When she was in Africa, she survives the Middle Passage despite a lot of people dying around her. So the images and the way Lawrence literally describes the journey through the Middle Passage for me was fantastic. Like, it was beautifully written. So she survives the Middle Passage. She's then sold as a slave to a plantation owner in Carolina, so obviously that in the US. And what was really nice about this was seeing the protagonist's interaction as a self-identifying African woman with other slaves who had been born in the US and who didn't know anything. And I don't know, like there wasn't a lack of identity, but there was a sense that they themselves didn't know who they were, but they didn't identify as African. So seeing them interact for me was very, very interesting, because I know that this is always a conversation about, African Americans not really, I wouldn't say not claiming their African roots, but just not knowing where they come from and everything like that. So I really loved how Lawrence literally had the main character and everyone else who was born in the US and who didn't really class himself as African and couldn't really understand her love for Africa and why she longed to go back and everything like that, and sort of I guess was kind of shaking her, saying, you need to adapt and everything like that. So I really like that bit. So yeah, she gets sold. She gets sold to a plantation owner who obviously takes advantage of her and rapes her, and it's terrible. But the rest of the story basically follows her through to being free, basically. And to be fair, the book is over a long period of time, from when she's young to when she's a big woman and she has children. She has a child, and she falls in love, and there's a lot in this book that I personally really love. So the fourth book, is that the fourth? 1, 2, 3, 4. So no, it's the fifth book. So the fifth book, now, guys, this one didn't teach me much. This one, I would say, it basically stirred up my love for classic literature. I deeply, deeply enjoyed this book. And that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. As I said, it didn't teach me anything. And obviously everyone knows Emily Bronte. She's from the she's from the Bronte family. They've been writing, they've been successful, they've been making bread, as you do. So basically this book kind of doesn't explore anything. It's literally about the toxic love the toxic relationship between Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff. Listen, it's just something that I would say is a good read. It's a book that I would say is a good read. If you want to get into classic literature, I would say this is probably one of the least boring books to read, because I know that a lot of classic books are done out here. They're boring. And that is what it is. Like, it is what it is. I'm not even going to try and sit here and defend classic literature. I feel like you have to have a certain sort of taste. Yeah, I think you have to have a certain sort of taste. And as I said, for me, this is the book that definitely introduced me to classic literature and made me say, I wouldn't mind a rainy day, sitting at my window, watching the rain pour, a cup of tea, and a classic book. That's a bit of me. Okay, I'm getting mixed up. So, Native Son, Girl, Woman, Other, The Lonely Londoners, The Book of Negroes, Wuthering Heights, and how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're on the 6th one, right? We're on the 6th one, guys. So the 6th book, the 6th book is Going to Meet the Man by James Baldwin. Now, let me tell you a little something about James Baldwin. Yeah, that is my jigger. James Baldwin is my guy. He's like, where if he was still here, we'd be parties, we'd be rownies, we'd be parring. Like, it would be a situation like me and James would be like, I love James. Like, honestly, you have to speak to me about James with nothing but respect. He is my literary Vybz Kartel, bro. Like, he's actually my literary Vybz Kartel. I love James Baldwin. And obviously it's unfair that he didn't really think that Richard Wright's book was a protest novel. However, they are great for 2 different reasons. So anyways, Uncle B, that's what it is. Uncle B. So Going to Meet the Man is basically a short collection of It's a collection of short stories, and obviously the stories basically cover a range of topics like jazz and sexuality, white supremacy, racism, and more. You should already know about James Baldwin's vibe. If you don't know, you need to get to know, because I don't know, like, I don't think I've ever met a person who doesn't know who JB is. JB, that's actually a little JB. I don't know anyone who doesn't know who JB is. Uncle B. If you don't, you need to get to know, because this is my guy. But as I was saying, it's a collection of short stories. I think there are, I don't know, maybe 9? I can't remember. I believe there are around 9 stories. I could be wrong. 7 or 9 stories. And each story covers a different topic. I think with short story collections, it's really hard for me to say this is what happens and this is why I love it and this is the narrative structure. It's really difficult because each short story is about a different thing. And the best I can do is basically say that my favorite short stories was the first one, which was The Rock Pile, and Sunny's Blues, which I actually can't remember where that is in the book. I believe it might be the 6th or 7th story. But yeah, I really did enjoy this book. And if you know anything about African American literature, you will know that James Baldwin is a credible author. He's a credible essayist. Like, he's just fantastic. So you have to, I would recommend a lot of people to read that book. Heathcliff, it's me, Kathy, you've come home. So this book, I think I've gotten a good 5 people to read this book, and because it is like a recent read, like it was published this year. But it was published when? It was published in like March, but I read it in January, I believe. I think I read it in January because I had a proof copy. And to be fair, like, I had the proof copy for a while and I just hadn't started it. Like, I just didn't start it. Like, I was procrastinating. I kept saying that I was going to read it. Like, I heard a lot of people speaking about it and I was really excited to read the book. And especially after, because as I said, like, I work in publishing, so I had the opportunity to meet the author and actually hear her read a small passage from the book. And from what she read, it sounded phenomenal, but it just took me a while to go back and say that I was going to read the book. So I think I read it like a month after I had met her. And this book, guys, like, you know it has to be a fantastic book. You know it has to be something that's beautifully written. You know it has to be levels. If it was published this year and it's on my 10 favorite books of all time, like, you know it has to be levels, bro. Like, there's no way it can't be levels. So this book is The Girl with the Loud Voice by Abby Dare or Derry. Oh, I'm so upset. I actually don't know how to pronounce her last name. Abby Dare, but there's an accent on the E. Derry. I'm gonna put her name there anyways. But yeah, so The Girl with the Loud Voice by Abby D. Let's just say D. So obviously this was Abby's first book. Her first novel, and I'm not gonna lie, Abby babe, if you're watching this, Abby, this book slaps. I don't think I've actually read a book like this, like from a first-time author, and had thought like, wow, I don't even know. Like, one, you were born to do this. You're born to write books. Two, this can't be your first book. You must have written a good 10,000 books before you got to this one. Like, this book is fantastic. So again, obviously it's not a short story collection. So I can give you like a brief overview of what happens, a brief synopsis. The book follows the life of a young girl who, despite her disadvantages, dares to dream. And she basically goes from extreme poverty, where obviously she's living with her father and her brothers, and obviously life isn't great. She can't go to school because they literally can't afford to send her to school. And obviously her mom's dead, so her mom used to provide for her, and her mom always wanted her to get an education. So she holds that in her heart that she wants to learn, and she wants to be able to basically educate other people once she learns and she has the qualifications. So what happens is that her father obviously marries her off to a big man so that he gets a dowry, and obviously that dowry pays for his rent and gives them food and everything like that. But obviously she has to go off, and she's one of three. Is she one of three wives? She's one of three wives, and she gets married to a really old, sleazy Nigerian man, and it isn't really nice. Like, obviously she's a young girl. I believe she was 12 at the start, maybe. I might be wrong. She was young, before 13. I don't know. She's extremely young. She gets married off. There was like an unfortunate event. I'm not going to say too much on that because I don't want to explain the whole book, but something horrible happens and she has to run away. And when she runs away, she seeks help from someone. I feel like I'm telling you guys too much, but she seeks help from someone, and then that person basically aids her in being sent away to become a house girl. And then it's literally from that point, like, obviously the start of the book is fantastic, but for me, her time as a house girl and what happens during her time in this, in a rich Nigerian household, for me was the best part of the book. And it is basically about how she goes from being a house girl, how she goes from being mistreated, and how she goes from being literally not considered by anyone, and beaten, and nearly raped and everything like that, to basically earning a place on a scholarship for her to be educated. As I said, it's a Nigerian author. It's written in Pidgin English, which I absolutely love. And it's just beautifully written, and the storyline is beautiful. There is no drop in pace. There's no drop in plot. Everything makes sense when you read this book. And everyone that I've actually suggested, everyone that I've recommended this book to has read it and said that it's fantastic, so it must be a fantastic book. So I really hope that Abby wins an award. Abby, I hope you win an award. Okay, so this is the 7th book, I believe. The 7th book. So, Black Boy by Richard Wright. So we're back on Uncle Richard Wright. Daddy Wright, yeah? We're back with Daddy Wright. Now, obviously, I mentioned Richard Wright when I spoke about Native Son. Again, love that book. Highly recommend. But yes, so I would only recommend people to read this book if they are a fan of Richard Wright himself, as opposed to just read it on a whim. It is a memoir, and it basically follows him from childhood up until the early years of his career. And like, I personally love this book because I love Richard Wright, and that basically gave me the will to finish this book. It's not terribly written, it's fantastic, like it's beautifully written, but it is a memoir, so you have to have an interest, I think, or you have to have an interest in who Richard Wright is to enjoy this book. But one thing I do enjoy about this book is that one thing I enjoy about Richard Wright, its writing style in general, is that sometimes it can come across as like a stream of consciousness. It just seems like free thought, and that speaks a lot. That speaks to me because I'm always thinking, and I just like how raw it is, how real it is, and this book, Black Boy in particular, again, he speaks on blackness and black male anxiety, and he speaks about his personal experiences with women, with white people, as a black individual wanting more for himself. And obviously he speaks about when he joined the Communist Party and everything that happened there. So it's on my top 10 books of all times because I really, really enjoyed the book. I'm not going to lie to you guys, this book is long and the print is small. I feel like, how long was it? And I only say it's long, I think it was like maybe 400 pages, but the text was like font 10, and there were hardly any paragraphs. It was all just on one, like, block text. And then there was obviously the chapters were quite long as well. So you have to have an interest in Richard Wright in order to read this book. If you do read it on a whim and just decide to just pick it up and read it and you like it, then good for you. But I would recommend that you like Richard Wright and that you start with Native Son before you go on to Black Boy. But again, fantastically written. I would want my sons to read this book after they read Native Son, and my daughters as well. So yeah, that's why it's on my list. The ninth book. So this book is Out of Africa by Karen Blixen. And again, like, as I said, this is a personal taste thing. And basically this book is about Karen's life, and this book basically gives us an insight into colonial Africa, and it's basically about a woman, Karen Blixen. I think I don't even know if that's her pen name or if that's her actual real name. Well, it's about Karen and about when she moves to Africa and her life during her time in Africa. And like, a lot of stuff happens, a lot of trivial stuff happens, a lot of stuff with a lot of stuff regarding her not being able to actually grow crop on the land that she buys, and basically being a failure for some time and then going on to be super successful. Her love interest talks about when she caught syphilis. I believe that's what she called, when she had syphilis. But basically what I'm trying to say is that I enjoyed this book. I did enjoy it. I feel like it's beautifully written again. I think I wouldn't recommend this book as go out and read this book. I probably would recommend this book after someone has read a couple of the other books that are on my list, barring Wuthering Heights. So if you read like the Book of Negroes, if you were interested in books like Girl, Woman, Other, The Girl with the Loud Voice, and Going to Meet the Man and Native Son, if you're interested in books like this, I probably would then send you to read this book, just to see that there is like a massive gap, a massive disparity between what actually happened and what a lot of white people who colonized Africa, who were living in colonial Africa, believed that happened. And well, that's what happened for them, but what happened, the terrible truth of what happened. So yeah, as I said, wouldn't really recommend this book off the jump, but again, it's beautifully written. It is a bit of a thick book, and again, it's a memoir. So again, I can't remember how I came about reading this, but it is a memoir. And personally, before I read this, I had no interest in Karen Blixen as an author. I don't even think I have any interest in her now, but it is one of those books that when I read it, I really liked it. So again, that's number 9 on my top 10 books. books, top 10 books I've read so far. And then the final book, which is number 10, and we're going back to my Caribbean, African American sort of love, right here. And the 10th book is The Jew Breaker, and I always get her name wrong, and I believe it's Edwidge Danticat, Edwidge Danticat. I'm gonna stick with that one. If I've mispronounced it, I am so sorry, but I think that's how you pronounce it. So basically, this book again is split into 9 parts, and it's basically like 9 sections of an interweaving narrative. And it obviously Edwidge is how you go. I don't know. Edwidge, she's a Haitian American author. So this book basically focuses on a particular time in history, and that was the rule of Baby Docs. I believe that's his name, President Baby Docs. And basically all the terror that happened and all the horror that happened in Haiti during his time in power. And the book basically opens on Kat and her father, who was a Jew breaker. And basically a Jew breaker is, I believe it was someone who set out to arrest, murder, and torture people before this, like, when the Jew was settling, something like that. There was something in the name. Can't remember. Let me even check my notes. It was someone who set out to murder, kill, and torture, and arrest individuals who I believe were against President Baby Docs. I said that it opens with Kat and her father, and Kat is born in Haiti and doesn't know anything really of her father's past. And then it is throughout the book and throughout the different narratives and the different people who come forward to tell a certain part of the story, it basically unfolds, and you come to know that this person isn't innocent in all of this. Like, her father isn't innocent in all of this, and he was a part of the violence, and he did torture and did murder people and everything like that. The entire book is basically about truth, redemption, responsibility, and whether someone is bad if they have a bad past. I think that's the easiest way for me to describe it. If someone's bad if they've done terrible things in their past, and how violence, and whether political or personal, I would say whether political or personal, how violence can actually impact a lot of people, both the person who is doing the violence and the person who's receiving the violence. And to be fair, it seemed like Kat's father had some sort of PTSD despite him being the bad person in all of this. And like, obviously he moved to America, he was being a better person, he was trying to be a better person, he was living a normal life, and he had fled that situation, but it didn't mean that it wasn't a part of his history and who he was. And one thing I will say about this book, what was I going to say? So I was going to say that the book jumps from like between past and present, and then you get like a full rounded picture of exactly what happened. And I really like the fact that it's like an interweaving narrative, and different people tell different parts of the story, and I really, really like that. Those are my top 10 books of all time, and that is what they've taught me. I'm tired. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm tired. My head hurts. But I had fun sharing this list with you. And I hope that in the future I can speak about, I feel like this list was just a bit, like, it was a bit intense. I felt like it had to be a bit serious, because like, for it to be a top 10 book, or even like a top book, it has to have taught me something quite important, or it has to have had a fantastic message. Wuthering Heights, okay, but it's sentimental. So I feel like that is why a lot of the books on this list were like, they were covering a particular topic. The main topics being race and gender. But these are definitely books that I would urge my children to read. As I was saying, I had so much fun by myself in my room in front of my camera speaking about books and basically sharing that list with you. And I hope that if anyone can take anything away from this video, is that you might go out and like buy one of these books and read them and let me know what you think. Again, I've told you, Wuthering Heights, don't fast up yourself if you know you're not into classic literature yet. Let's not do it yet. I'll do a video on classic books and my favorite classics. Black Boy, I would say read Native Son first, and if you take an interest in Richard Wright as an author, then you should read Black Boy. But the other books are literally, I urge everyone to go out and read them. I urge everyone to have a copy of each book on their shelf. I urge everyone to ensure that their children reads books like these, because these are the books that teach you about history and teach you about politics and teach you about race and gender in a completely different way. And that's one thing I love about fiction books, that whilst fictionalized and whilst I guess people say imaginative, they teach you about the world and teach you about a time just in a completely different way that non-fiction teaches you. When honestly, just let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like to see. Let me know if I can change anything. I doubt any of my other videos are going to be this long and this chatty, although I will be chatting about books, but I'm going to probably just keep them a bit shorter. But this time, as I said, I just wanted to do like a brief introduction to the books that I've read and basically share all the books that I think that people should be reading. But yeah, as I said, like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. Or is it? No? Well, see ya. I'm gonna eat some food, bro. Bye.